From gut-wrenching Pueblo, Colorado, it's another thrilling episode of Kerry's Box Live.
Just how liberal is that liberal lamestream media that we've all heard about from Republicans? That's today's mission with our guest, fascist hunter Andrew Rei. Now, control of the media is fascism, and it's liberals who control the mass media, then liberals are the fascists, right? It just makes perfect sense. Makes sense to me. It also makes sense to me because I've worked for corporations, and I have a tough time describing any corporation I work for as liberal media. I'm serious, man. The corporations I've worked for in my life would have had you working a 16-hour shift. Then you would get a bathroom break and a bowl of gruel in that order. You get to sleep for 3 hours on a cot, and they charge you for that, and then you get to pull another 16-hour shift with no days off at all, no sick days. If you die on the job, they toss you out back, they get someone else to sleep in your cot and work at your station. That's what corporations would do if they could do it. I wouldn't describe any of that as anything close to being liberal. Then you have government pull its regulations, and our corporations gobble up another American institution and turn it into complete shit for all of us because they can. It's because they can. Don't you see? It's because they can. I wouldn't describe taking advantage of people and then trying to get those into office who deregulate these corporations even more than they already have so corporations can make more money and gobble up other American institutions, relocate our manufacturing industry, destroy our small businesses. I wouldn't call that liberal. It's not a patriotic act, much less a liberal one. Taking advantage of vulnerable people who you made vulnerable so that you can force them into an even tighter spot so you can ship your money offshore, that's not liberal. That is not liberal. The fact I'm trying to get across here is that corporations are more like the Borg in Star Trek. Yes, contrary to Supreme Court opinion, corporations are not really people. Corporations are self-serving entities that take on a mindset all their own. People may make up that corporation, but they serve the corporation. How can we increase profits? That's what you're going to hear in a corporation. That's all a corporation is for. The bigger the corporation gets and the less regulation that corporation has, the more dangerous to our safety and our freedoms that corporation becomes. So let's take a look at what deregulation has done to one vital American institution that we rely on for the information crucial to making decisions collectively as a nation. Let's take a look at who owns it and who runs it. Let's get right to the bottom of this conspiracy the Republicans claim is lies by the left-wing media. Let's find out just how liberal that liberal media really is. Our guest today is writer Andrew Rei. We have a lot in common on this one.
Hey, Kerry, how are you doing?
Doing good, and you have a lot to talk to us about this time out.
Yes, I do. So let me start with this. Today, 90% of the mass media in this country are owned or controlled by 6 large corporations.
Just
six. So I'll call them the Big 6. Yes.
The Big
Just 6.
Okay.
Yes,
the Big Six. Right.
Comcast is the first. Time Warner, Disney, CBS, Viacom, and News Corp. In 1983, 50 media companies owned or controlled 90% of the media. And hundreds of entities, people owned the other 10%.
Right.
All right.
A lot more diversity then.
Yeah, there was a lot more diversity then. Now it's more consolidated. Both you and I know, and I'm sure many people listening know, that one of the most pathetic pieces of fascist GOP gaslighting propaganda we hear from the cons is liberals control the media.
Yeah, and
liberals control the media.
Yeah, and they
right.
like to say lamestream, the left-wing lamestream media. That's what Sarah Palin says.
Yeah.
And whatever they call it, but yeah, it's all left-wing, and also at the same time managed to make Fox News in a defensive position. It's them against all of these giant media conglomerates, and they're all liberal, and they're all coming for your money, and all coming to force you to take health care.
Yes. Oh yeah. Now, you want to take a guess at the political affiliation of the executives of the Big Six?
Oh, my goodness.
Take a guess.
Yeah. You know it's not what they're saying. It's not what they're saying. It's not a left-wing lamestream media.
No, because most of these, in fact, practically every corporate executive of the Big Six is a conservative Republican. When they say that, quote, liberals control the media, that is an instance of the worst form of hypocrisy and a psychiatric ploy known as projection. And as we know, the GOP are expert projectional hypocrites.
It could also be called lying. Hypocrites. It could also just be called lying too.
Well, that too. But see, with projection, though, the reason why it's a psychiatric ploy is that, as I've mentioned on this show before, it's the I'm rubber, you're glue, everything bounces off me, sticks to you argument, the playground argument, right? And they're really good at it. They're very, very good at it. They know how to project all of their bullshit onto other people.
Play
right?
the victim.
And say, it's the Democrats that are fascist, right? Liberal fascism, which I had to laugh so hard. I almost died laughing when
ridiculous.
I first saw that.
It's an oxymoron, for one thing.
That there's liberal fascism and liberal fascists. Well, first of all, liberalism and fascism are completely at the opposite ends of the political spectrum. There's no such thing. That's what you call an oxymoron. Like a smart Republican, military intelligence, guest host, whatever. It's an oxymoron.
You can
There's
really
no
put it into
such thing
perspective.
as liberal fascism.
You can put it into perspective, too, really well. It goes way back to the 60s when we were dealing with the Soviet Union, communism. And here we had pot-smoking, long-haired hippies, and they were called communists. And I always wondered how well those people would have done in the Soviet Union. I don't think that they would have been able to protest.
No,
because been able to do any of the things that they did. We're talking. It's not like they're communism and the long-haired hippies want us to turn communists. It's diametrically opposed to one another.
Yeah. But see, you have to say that. You have to say that if you're a fascist.
Yeah.
Because you have to keep foisting the narrative that anybody who doesn't agree with us is bad, right?
Yeah.
That's the identification of enemy scapegoats as a unifying cause, DC of fascism, right? So
that's correct,
back then it was the pot-smoking hippies that were the others. They were the enemies, all right? And then the poor were and still are the scapegoats, right? And so that's how that works. So the reason why this is so bad, of course, is one other of the DC, in fact, two other DCs of fascism, control the mass media and propaganda campaign employed.
My goodness.
This is why, two of the reasons why I say that the GOP's politicians and about one-third of its voters are fascists. Even though they like to try to deny it, sorry, guys, you can't do it.
No.
You're fascist. Period. End of story. End of quote. That's it.
That's it.
So there you go. So, all right, so you might be wondering, okay, now wait a minute. How did we get to this point? How did we go from having 90% of the mass media controlled by 50 media companies to having it being controlled by 6 companies? How did that happen? What in the world could have possibly happened in order to, for that to occur? Well, actually, there were 2 things that happened. There were 2 events that eventually led to the situation as it is now. The first one occurred in 1987 when good old Ronnie Reagan, the great communicator,
we
was
remember
president.
fondly, yes.
Yes, we remember him fondly in
trees
quote
cause
marks.
pollution.
Yes, the great communicator. He and the FCC decided that the fairness doctrine should go bye-bye.
Yeah,
now,
you
the
gotta get rid of
fairness
it.
doctrine, as you
Yeah.
remember, of course, we're both former radio DJs, so we remember this. But
Yes.
the fairness doctrine required the media, right, TV, radio, newspapers especially, to give equal time, at the very least, for both sides of an issue, or both major candidates in a political race, or whatever, right? You were required to give equal time at the very least.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
for instance, you would watch the 11 o'clock news, and you get some guy up there saying, "I think this is really bad," and then the next night you would have another different guy up there saying, "Well, I don't agree with the guy from last night. I think it should be this way," right? That was what the fairness doctrine was all about. Right?
Yes,
You got to hear both sides of the story, both sides of the argument, and then you can make up your own mind. And it was up to the media to kind of be the referees, the officials of the whole thing, by saying, well, actually, Mr. Smith is correct about this, and Mrs. Jones is completely wrong, and all that, right? Because the media were basically life's referees back then.
That's right.
They were the people we counted on to tell us the truth and to expose all of the corrupt people, like I don't know, Tricky Dick Nixon.
Yeah.
That was because of the media, because the media did their jobs back then.
There was integrity.
Well, the fairness doctrine, now that it's out the window, they can lie openly. They can slant their coverage any way they want. They can do whatever they want because there's no more fairness doctrine.
Well,
right?
it's even worse than that too, because we have the appeals court in Florida decision for Fox News that pretty much rendered the FCC guidelines to suggestions as opposed to rules. Katie barred the door. You can say whatever and do pretty much anything you want on the public airwaves now. So,
if I remember correctly, that appeals court essentially said that it's up to the people to do their own research and to be smart enough to know whether Fox News or whoever it is lying to you or not, right? Which was perfect. It fit in perfectly with the fascist GOP because that's exactly what they want. See, they want everybody to have to do their own research and use critical thinking skills to figure out that they're fascist liars, right? Because that's perfect, because all you're going to get from them is propaganda.
That's
right?
right.
So unless you see through the propaganda, right, then there you go. And that's also the reason, by the way, the GOP are so against public education. Because if a public is well-informed and educated, they can see through all their bullshit and propaganda.
Well, they're also...
It's all connected here. It's all connected.
One of their bigger issues is, and one of their bigger duties, it would appear, is to limit public education in any way possible, even to the point where it's a campaign issue on the Republican side this next time out, to even get rid of the Department of Education, so we can get rid of any fairness that we've ever had in public education, fairness that really didn't exist before the Department of Education, and it's still a regional, subject of regional discrimination and whatnot. So rather than expand and make it more fair to everyone, and the money's equally distributed, amongst everyone, we still have a problem, and they're talking about cutting the damn thing. So you're just gutting it.
And then even worse is the fact that you can't really stop kids from going to college, but we can certainly make it so expensive that if you do decide to go to college, right, you'll owe so much that you end up pretty much working like an indentured servant trying to pay off your college loans. This is something that President Obama is trying to reverse right now.
Something he had to do himself.
Some people may even qualify for loan forgiveness, like we're talking gone after like 15 or 20 years. But see, if the fascists can say, all right, well, if we can't stop people from going to avail themselves of higher education, let's make it really expensive so at the very least our friends in the financial industry can make a killing. And that's exactly what's happened over the last 40 or 50 years. All these student loan organizations and all that are collecting, unbelievable amounts of interest on top of the principal loan amounts that they give you to get an education. And it's also one of the reasons why so many specialized professionals have to charge so much money for their services, because they've got these huge student loans that they have to pay off. I mean, what was it that President Obama said? Something about how I believe it was in the early 2000s, he said that, well, this is like 2008 or whatever, he said that Michelle and I just paid off our student loans a few years ago.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
20 years after they left college, and they finally paid off their student loans. They're both lawyers. They both went and got law degrees, and that's one of the more expensive pieces of education you can get, is to get a law degree. But still, 20 years, it should not take 20 years for you to pay off your student loan.
Especially at Harvard or Princeton. I would imagine it's rather expensive to go to law school there.
So it's all, it's all on the fairness kick here. So the fairness doctrine went away in 1987, right? Now, 9 years later was the second event, and that was the Telecommunications Act, right? Goodness. The Telecom Act of 1996.
Yeah.
Now, what happened was, of course, in 1996, this was a year after the Republican Revolution took hold, so they were in charge of Congress. Hey, kind of like the way it is now. Huh?
Yeah, kind of like
anyway,
so it's worse now.
So the GOP wrote and passed this Telecommunications Act, but they didn't have enough votes for a veto override, but they were really lucky. The GOP back then were really fortunate because they found enough sellout Democrats to combine with them.
Blue dogs.
And then the sellout Democrats went to Clinton, and they said, if you veto this, we're going to join the GOP in overriding your veto. So
nice guys.
Clinton decided to take the path of least resistance and go ahead and sign the thing. And by the way, this was one of three major pieces of legislation where those sellout Democrats combined with the GOP
and that one really hurt.
Do that to Clinton.
That one really hurt, too.
NAFTA was one of the other ones. Yeah, NAFTA was one of them, and the other one was the repeal of Glass-Steagall. Now, I know Clinton takes a lot of unfair criticism about that stuff, but you got to realize what the truth here is. Clinton basically went through the same thing that Obama is going through now, where he had an obstructionist GOP Congress that was doing stuff to him at every turn, right? And then the sellout Democrats certainly didn't help anything. But that's how that happened. Now, as you know, before the Telecom Act of 1996, media ownership was restricted a bit, right?
Yes.
You could own basically one AM radio station, an FM radio station, and one TV station per market.
That's correct,
well,
and it worked
now
well.
The Telecom Act has been around for about almost 20 years. It's a lot worse than that. I mean,
sure.
You can own a lot more.
Yeah,
a lot more.
And a lot of people, even because of that act right there, and of course what they did, all the bigger companies gobbled up each other up, the smaller companies gobbled each other up, and I went through the process. I was still in the business at the time, although it was easier, I was still able to work, but it was more difficult because one company would get sold out from under another, and it was just nuts. And what most people don't realize now is that hometown with those same 2 or 3 radio stations, if you're in a city, a town, say the size, 50,000 people or so, and you've got 2 or 3 radio stations, they always competed against each other, and they always, they were owned by different people. But now what you don't understand, what a lot of people don't realize, is in some markets, one company owns them all. And you don't really have but the 1 or 2 personalities in even a medium or major market who do original local content, and even that's shopped around inside the company to different radio stations via satellite. So it's more work, and then of course digital media coming into it allows for people to do their radio shift in 10 minutes, and so you've cut back time, you've cut back expenses, and you've got less moving parts, so to speak, but more importantly, less service to the local community, and it's more of a nationalistic Muzak kind of thing than it is anything else. Yeah,
you don't see very many of the mom and pop TV or radio stations.
Right. I've worked for a few of those, man. I've worked for a few of those, and those can be rather insane, actually. But the mom and pop. I mean, if you're working with a family that owns the whatever it is, oh my God. And so I've run into that a few times, but you don't see that anymore, and they don't. And that was the whole idea behind a radio signal, was to service the local community. And then they figured out ways to do less and less of that. And if they, can run all their stuff in 2 minutes overnight on the weekend, then they do that. They know that they're required.
What's happening more now is automation.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, right.
There are fewer actual people on the radio than there used to be.
Satellite and digital.
And it's just the talk stations that actually feature, live people or people coming out over satellite, right? So you got your Rush Limbaughs and all that other bullshit. But but automation is pretty much the way it's gone. So there's fewer actual people on the air speaking. Right, and you just have a bare minimum of engineers and other people, board operators or whatever, that are just making sure that the computer doesn't
they're
go
overworked and underpaid, and they can't count on it as their stable income like they used to. It doesn't service the local community, not really, and
not really.
No, not really at all. I mean, there's no community affairs kind of stuff. Stations used to do that deliberately because the local community wanted it. It wasn't just required. It was the community actually wanted it. I thought MOR. First off, radio gave up too quickly to television, but MOR gave up too quickly to Top 40. I love that format. I really do, because you service different day parts and different audiences. But you tie it all into your local community. It's all about where you are, and that to me was what radio. A good spirit of radio, because you could talk. You get somebody who knows everybody locally, and you put them on the radio.
It's nothing like when we were radio DJs, my friend.
No, not at all.
Nothing like that.
No, you don't have to. You don't have to put the nickel on top of the turnstile or anything. You just, you have to change the needle real quick. I remember a few times I hopped.
I didn't have to do much of that myself, but mine was mostly carts. And CD players.
Well, I remember before the carts, I started off with records, man. I had two turntables, one on either side, and I remember more than a few times. And then I had a bay of cart machines, and I remember times when I was down to one slot that was working right on the cart machine, and I have a stop set I got to run, and then I've got one turntable and I've got a stack of records I'm supposed to play. It's just I've been in a few of those tight spots. I was a baby disc jockey back then.
People may be thinking, okay, well, all right, if the big six control 90%, then there must be a lot of ownership of that 10%. There must still be some mom and pop radio and TV stations and all that, or whatever. Let me give you a few examples from here in the good old Rose City, Portland, Oregon, about how that is not true. Okay. I'll start with the TV stations. The ABC affiliate is K2, KATU, Channel 2. It's owned by the Sinclair Broadcast Group, who bought it out from Fisher Broadcasting. Sinclair Broadcast Group owns 161 TV stations and 375 channels in 79 markets.
And they've got 10 employees, right? They've got 10 employees.
And the reason why it's 100. The reason why it's 161 stations and 375 channels is because they're one of the groups that likes to use the digital sub-channels. Like Channel 2 here has 2 sub-channels, right? And a lot of the Sinclair stations around the country use their digital sub-channels. And so that's why it's 161 and 375, right? But 161 TV stations in 79 markets, right?
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a lot. Now, let's move along to the CBS affiliate around here, KOIN 6, KOIN. It's owned by Lynn Broadcasting, but Lynn Broadcasting is a subsidiary of Media General. Media General owns 71 TV stations in 48 markets.
That's crazy. Yikes. That is just crazy. And you can't service your local market. I mean, not as well. Not as well. You service the local, time, temp, and weather locally, and that's about it.
Yeah, and the thing is right, KOIN 6 likes to say, watching out for you. They're supposed to be watching out for their local market.
Watching out for corporate.
Right. Okay.
That's who they're watching out for.
watching out for MG. All right, the NBC affiliate here is KGW Channel 8, and it's owned by Gannett Media, who bought it from Belo Corp.
Aren't they great?
Belo used to own something like 85 TV stations across the country before they sold out to Gannett. And I think they still run a few of those stations, but Gannett basically runs it all. Now, Gannett owns 12 newspapers, including USA Today. In fact, that's pretty much kind of how they got big in the 80s, was they came up with USA Today.
That's right.
They've actually been around since the Roaring 20s, right? They were a newspaper thing at the start. So they have a dozen newspapers. They own 38 TV stations, but some of those TV stations are operated by other corporations, but they receive shared services from Gannett. So Gannett kind of controls them.
They get the the memo from corporate. That's how that works. That's what they mean by shared. We share the memos with you.
Yep. Okay. Now, we move along to the Fox and My Network TV affiliates, which are owned by the same company here. That's KPTV, the Fox affiliate, Channel 12, and KPDX, Channel 49. Now, get this. It says that they're owned by the KPTV, KPDX Broadcasting Corporation through World Now. But, as it turns out, they're really still owned by the Meredith Broadcasting Corporation, Meredith Corporation, right? Which
it's
is
like a
who we
shell
knew
company
owned
or
it
something?
before. Well, yeah, I think so. From my research, it appears that Meredith really does still own it, but I guess what they decided to do is to say, okay, KPTV, KPDX Broadcasting Corporation will say that they own the two stations, but they're actually owned by Meredith.
Okay.
So, Meredith used to own a lot more TV stations and radio stations than they do now, but now they're down to 18 TV stations, 7 radio stations, and 22 magazines.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
Now, one more. There's one more. The CW affiliate, KRCW, Channel 32, is owned by Tribune Broadcasting.
Okay.
Now, why does that sound familiar? Because it's a subsidiary of Tribune Media. Tribune Media. It owns 39 TV stations and 3 cable channels, including WGN America, the cable version of WGN Chicago.
Yeah.
And Tribune also owns the Chicago Cubs and some other big businesses in the Chicago area. Right?
Wow.
So lest you think that there is a great diversity of ownership among the 10% that aren't controlled by the Big Six, you would be wrong.
So what
right?
basically in this whole deal is we're twice removed from when local television stations and local radio stations service their own community, and now we're having a hard time with them, all of them together servicing the nation. Is that pretty much where we're laid out here? I think so.
Pretty much. Now I haven't even got into the radio market.
Yeah, I know. Well,
right? There are 61 radio stations in this market, 23 on the AM dial and 38 on the FM. Of those 61, Clear Channel owns 10 of them, 8 on the FM dial and the other 2 on AM.
Jeez.
Entercom owns 7, which is 5 on the FM dial, the other 2 on AM. Alpha Broadcasting, they own 7, 2 on the AM dial, 5 on the FM.
Man.
Bustos Media owns 6, and they're all Spanish language channels, 4 on the AM dial and 2 on the FM dial. And a company called EMF owns 5, and they're all on the FM dial.
And that's all in the
so
Portland market?
That's 35 radio stations in this market, more than half, nearly around 60%, that are owned by 5 different entities.
Jeez.
Think about that for a second.
Yeah, but I mean,
5 companies
that many
own
in just Portland.
60% of the radio stations in this market. And we're a fairly big market here. We're like 22nd, 23rd, 24th in the whole nation.
Oh, I had no idea.
Right? So there are markets bigger than ours, but we're a lot bigger than a lot of other markets. The last one I'll talk about is the newspaper business. Now, as we know, of course, the newspaper business is going by the wayside thanks to the Internet and digital media and all that. But lest you think there's a whole bunch of mom-and-pop newspapers and stuff like that, not really. Because the Oregonian, which is this state's biggest, largest circulation newspaper by far, is owned by Advance Publications. Advance owns 37 newspapers, 11 business journals and periodicals, and 26 magazines, plus 3 cable networks and a few dozen digital media outlets.
Man. Yeah.
So what can we glean from all of this information? We can glean that the number of companies and corporations that controlled 90% of the media in 50, now nearly control all of it.
Man,
Let's think about that for a second.
Yeah, and I know especially with a bad newspaper, because most places only have the one paper, and most small towns, and now I realize they're owned by larger corporations now, but one bad paper can ruin a community. We've got that problem here in Pueblo, Colorado, where the papers it's off the charts right wing in a liberal town where every major candidate for major office comes to campaign. And we have a right-wing paper that just keeps nothing but empty buildings in this place. It's amazing stuff, and I don't know how people don't see what the problem is. But between the paper and the city council, that's our community. It's pretty much a right-wing ghost town, and the wrong paper in the wrong place can ruin a smaller.
Community. and then it's even worse, of course, because a lot of even the bigger cities that used to have two newspapers that would compete against each other,
right? They have the one,
are either have the same entity that owns both of them, or one of them is closed down, and basically the one that's left over has a monopoly, like here in Portland, where the Oregonian has it, because the Oregon Journal, right? It got folded into the Oregonian back in 1982, so it's been more than 30 years since the Oregonian has had any competition around here. And I've been critical of the Oregonian for a couple of years because, for the most part, they're a libertarian. They're a firebagger media source.
Oh man,
because they talk about false equivalency, and they talk about this libertarian stuff all the time. It's ridiculous. It really is. It's bad. It's that bad. Luckily, though, you remember what the FCC did a couple of months back, 2-3 months back? Do you remember what they did back then?
Agreed to keep the net neutrality. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And do you know why that's so important?
Yeah, because we wouldn't have any independent media without it. We wouldn't have.
Correct.
We wouldn't have this show, for instance. We wouldn't have any kind of publication that's independent online and successful, and I know a lot of those are right-wing, but we wouldn't have them.
What the cons would have done, using all the money, because remember, they've got so much of the money and wealth in this country, they would have done something called throttling, right?
Yes.
Which is, basically, they would have bought all of the high-speed Internet access and all that, and would have left us with our slow DSL and all that, right? And so, basically, any independent media would be crowded out, or it would be so slow that the information that would come from the cons would come a lot quicker than anybody else, right? Using this throttling thing. But now, since the FCC has decided to keep net neutrality and consider Internet service a public utility, now the cons can't do that. And, of course, they were grumbling all the way after that decision. Oh, it's free market, and all that.
A lot of them, like Ted Cruz.
Yeah, too bad, guys.
A lot of them, like Ted Cruz, didn't even understand what the issue was about, or at least they weren't able to convey what they thought it was about. But,
but that didn't stop them from criticizing
it didn't stop them from being against it. That's right, because it was, we're against this change, and it wasn't a change. It was an attempt to keep things the way they are. And but anyway, we've got, and of course they're eager to divide it up. They want those faster lanes and the slower lanes and everything you just mentioned. We would be in for a world of hurt because it's another way of choking off the truth on a massive scale. And so, all right, so you might be wondering, okay, so who are these big six, right? Who are they, right? Well, we've heard a lot about Comcast. We know that Comcast finally was able to buy off NBC Universal. And NBC Universal owned a lot of media. And so that's the reason why when Comcast bought them, right, they became one of the big six. They were pretty much already the big six, one of the big six beforehand. So really what they did was that they just changed names, right, because GE owned NBC Universal for a while. Right.
And, all this complicated stuff happened. But basically Comcast is that huge.
And for the liberals out there, that's MSNBC.
We know that they're a cable TV provider, and they do Internet, and they do phone stuff, and I used to do their triple play when I lived in my old apartment. I don't anymore.
Right.
That's another story for another day.
Yes, I could tell you stories about that.
So Time Warner used to be Ted Turner's company. If you remember, you know who Ted Turner is.
Sure.
Right? And Ted Turner is pretty much a liberal, but when he allowed himself to be bought out by Time Warner, then it became run by a bunch of conservatives. So Time, like Time Magazine, the Seven Sisters of magazines,
Jeez,
right? They're
yes.
all under the Time Warner umbrella. All, they're just huge.
Fewer and fewer people getting to decide what we
Yes.
see and hear and what we read. It's a,
Yes.
it's not, it's a dangerous thing.
And then, of course, they own a couple of movie houses as well.
Yes.
Because the mass media is also has movie houses and such as a part of it. So, and then, of course, Disney, right? Disney is freaking huge. They were already huge before they started buying out people after 1996, right? They were already pretty freaking huge. But one of the biggest acquisitions they made a few years back was when they bought Capital Cities. Now, Capital Cities is the corporation that owns everything considered ABC. So the ABC network, the ESPN channels,
division,
right?
yeah.
All that stuff was ABC, right? Well, Disney bought Cap Cities, and then they got just that much bigger. Right?
Man.
CBS, that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. CBS owns a lot. Viacom are the guys who own a lot of the cable TV channels. A lot of them, not all of them, but most of the cable TV channels you see are actually owned by Viacom. Now, not necessarily directly, because they have some shell corporations in between. But if you trace them to the top, you'll find Viacom there. And then we get to number 6, News Corp.
Okay.
Guess what News Corp owns?
Oh, you wanted me
I'm
to guess.
smiling at this answer. Run by an Australian and a Saudi prince.
Right. Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Fox and their affiliates and
Yes.
and everything that they
Fox
do, including
News.
the Wall Street Journal and God knows what else.
All of the Fox TV stations, right, or TV channels.
Yeah.
Quite a few of the bigger newspapers in this country are owned by News Corp.
And the
right?
network, right? The network itself, the entertainment.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All the Fox channels,
Right.
every last one of them, from Big Fox to Fox Sports, the whole shebang.
The whole kit and
is
caboodle.
owned by News Corp. The whole kit and caboodle. Yep.
Yeah.
And so when you think about this, you're thinking, geez, these 6 companies, the big 6, really do own a lot of our media. And so people wonder what the heck you can do about it. Well, I can tell you what to do about it. You use your brain. You use your critical thinking skills if you have them.
If
and
they're
you
still
say,
left,
hey,
yeah.
wait a minute. You say, hey, wait a minute. We can't believe everything we see and hear in the media. We have to take it and we have to run it through the course of our critical thinking skills and say, that just doesn't sound right to me. Something I do constantly, right?
Yeah.
I watch the news around here, and, I hardly ever say anything about politics. And there's a good reason why.
Okay.
Because, basically, their owners have told them not to, see? And so this is the control of the mass media part of fascism. So if you're not going to say, okay, the Democrats are fascist, they're bad, blah, 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 if you're not going to do false equivalency, or if you're not going to project saying, oh, no, it's the Democrats that are fascist, blah, 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 then you have to do something that's even worse. And this is what most of the media do. The so-called liberal media do.
Okay.
They simply ignore the corruption and criminality of the GOP.
Yeah.
And so if you watch a lot of local news now, so I implore you, watch multiple channels of your local news, and you will notice that there is a pattern. They will very rarely talk about politics, but they will talk about everything else.
But they won't.
And I'm talking just about everything else, right? The cow that somehow got loose and got hit by a car on the street.
Yeah.
That'll be there. If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah,
right?
the alligator roaming in the neighborhood.
A sea lion sitting on a dock, which is something that happened around here. A sea lion got onto one of the docks on the rivers around here. And stuff about celebrities and all that stuff. But the real important stuff, we don't need to hear that.
So what you're saying, I think, is that we just to combat it, still look at the variety of sources out there and to digest them and try to find the whole story as opposed to one angle of a story. You can still do that.
Yeah.
You can still discern. And that's not something that we're suggesting just for liberals. I mean, it would behoove Republicans, conservatives, fascists who don't know they're fascists to start reading multiple sources instead of just hearing what they want to hear and moving forward on that.
Yeah, but see, even worse though is because the conservatives have so much control over the media.
Yeah.
Right. When they are going to say anything, it's going to be fascist propaganda.
Sure.
But it's going to be dressed up as news.
Oh, I'm suggesting,
right?
though,
So
I'm just suggesting that
Fox
maybe
News.
Conservatives themselves should start looking at a variety of sources. You don't have to look at a liberal publication, but for God's sake, don't just assume everything's liberal that other than Fox News or Rush Limbaugh.
Okay. Now, I've heard and seen that argument a lot. Something about how conservatives are ignorant or stupid or whatever.
Yeah.
And here's my answer to that. That is a really dangerous conclusion to come to. You have to remember, conservatives are fascist psychopaths.
Right, okay.
The fascism we've talked about a lot. The psychopathology part of it, we haven't talked a lot about it on this show. Okay. You have to realize something. Psychopaths are intelligent people, but they are also insane. And so they use their intelligence to mask their insanity. Right? Now, sure, you can call a lot of the rest of the GOP stupid, ignorant, ignoramuses, whatever, right? Dumb, idiotic. Yes, you can call them that. But do not make that mistake with the cons, right? They control the media. They control the money. They're intelligent, but they are also freaking crazy.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just talking about
do not make that conclusion
the basic Republican
that they
voter.
are stupid. They are not. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's the other people in the party who listen to them because they're too stupid to realize that they're victims of the propaganda campaign that the GOP launched nearly 100 years ago. The fascist gaslighting propaganda campaign.
And I'm just suggesting that it would behoove them to read more. That's all. That's all. I'm
well, not the cons. The cons don't worry. No. The cons. They're already intelligent. They know what's going on. They're just going to intentionally. They don't give a fuck.
Right.
Let's put it that way. So we should be telling the rest of the GOP, the progressives, the moderates, especially, hey, go out and start reading some stuff here.
Yes, that was
my
point.
Put that through your critical thinking filter. Yeah. But do not make the mistake that the cons aren't intelligent or whatever, and that they should read. No. As a matter of fact, the fact that they do read and then they spout their fascist propaganda is actually a bad thing. So those are the people we need to stop reading, because we're not going to change their minds no matter what.
Well, let's stop them from writing.
The rest of the GOP, it's the rest of the GOP, especially the progressives and moderates, the two-thirds voting majority. They're the people that need to educate themselves about what's going on. So, try to remember that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Do not underestimate the fascist psychopathology of the Republican conservatives. Do not. Do it at your own risk, because trust me, they are smart, but they are also insane, and that is a really bad combination.
It is a bad combination.
Really bad combination.
It is.
So, and so the thing is, right? Okay, so I've talked before about the first Republican progressive and moderate revolution, which started in 1930. It ran until about 66-ish, somewhere in there, before the 1968 elections, when all of the Dixiecrats became Republicans, and things have pretty much been that way ever since, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so what launched that first revolution, of course, was the fact that the GOP used that fascist gaslighting propaganda campaign to control politics in the Roaring '20s, and they did. They had total control of politics, not only in D.C., but across the country, right? But because of their financial tomfoolery, it led to the Wall Street crash of '29 and the Great Depression. So the difference between what happened with the Great Recession starting in 2008, running through till now, and what happened back then was that back then the media actually did their jobs. The cons didn't own all the media. In fact, they owned very little of the media back then. So the media did their jobs. They knew exactly who to blame for the Great Depression. It was the Republicans. It was the rich people who were trading on margins and doing all this other stuff.
All the stuff they did this last time.
Well, yeah, but see, but again, the reason why the first Republican progressive and moderate revolution worked is that the media did their job, and that the cons didn't own very much of it.
Right.
Well, now we have the reverse situation where they own nearly all of it, and so the media don't do their jobs because their owners tell them not to. Ignore everything. What's that thing from The Wizard of Oz? Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to us. We're going to screw you over anyway. Don't pay attention to us. Go away. That's exactly what's happening now. And that's why the second Republican progressive and moderate revolution hasn't been launched yet, because the progressives and moderates still think that the cons are telling them the truth about stuff when they're lying. They're outright lying. Propaganda, fascist propaganda. So if they ever wake up, like their predecessors did in 1930, then the GOP are screwed, because they are 2/3 of the GOP voters. Right? They're nearly none of the politicians.
Yeah.
But they're 2/3 of the voters. See, so if the GOP progressives and moderates wake up to the truth, the GOP are done. Their goose is cooked. They're probably going to go away forever.
That would be nice.
Right? And so that's why.
It's a pleasant
That's
thought.
why the Republican conservatives are trying really, really hard to get control of all media, so that they can continue to voice their narrative and continue to fool the progressives and moderates into thinking that the cons, are correct about everything, when it's the exact opposite. And so that's why this media consolidation stuff is really, really important. If you've got so few people that control all the media, then there's a better chance for fascism and authoritarian regimes than anything else.
And some of these people are loose cannons, and just on their own. Some of these very rich people who own these large groups of media publications and TV stations and whatnot, and they'll just decide. I mean, we're talking about just in fewer hands all the time, and also with a particular conservative bent, and that's what people get, and it's just not doing a good service for the country at all.
Yeah,
my goodness.
Now get this. Guess what the combined income per year of the big six are?
Oh, good Lord. I don't know.
The combined income. It's
I
over $300 billion.
Man.
Among those six.
Jeez.
$300 billion. And just think if Comcast and Time Warner, had decided to merge. Right?
Yeah, well, right.
Then it would have been, it'd be $5.
Well, wasn't it? It was.
And then they would have found a way to increase their profits.
It wasn't their decision, I don't think. Thank goodness.
Yeah, but $300 billion being made from 6 corporations, $300 billion. How much money is that? Think about that.
It's a lot of money that gets whittled down to just a few people who own the most stock in those same companies that you talked about, who are taking everyone to the cleaners over something that should belong to people.
Right.
And the public airwaves belong to people, and it should be administered by government.
Well, they should.
Yes,
they should belong to the people, but as we know, they pretty much don't. And then, and then here's the coup de grace. Here's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Because the Republicans rewrote the federal tax code to being the upside-down tax code that it is now, upside down meaning that the wealthy and big corporations pay a lower effective rate of tax than the people under them, right? Because of that, these media giants have more money to go out and then buy more media.
Yeah.
It's a vicious cycle.
It sure is.
Right? If all of these big corporations, and not just in the media either. I mean, listen, there are a bunch of other industries where the littler guys are being bought out by the big guys.
Oh,
right?
sure.
Now, I remember a book around, 1980 by Alvin Toffler called Future Shock.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if you remember that book.
I do.
And you know what Toffler said? He predicted back then that this would happen. This was before Reagan obliterated the Fairness Doctrine and before the Telecom Act. Toffler said this is going to happen. He predicted it exactly. He said that most businesses will be consolidated into 4 or 5, maybe 10 at the most, big corporations that will own everything. Right?
What was the Sylvester Stallone movie where everything was owned by Taco Bell? I think that's how it ended up.
You mean Demolition Man?
Yeah, it was one of those futuristic movies you did. Yeah, everything was owned by Taco Bell.
Yeah, it was Demolition Man.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and Taco Bell was the it was the restaurant of the San Angeles area because San Angeles encompassed everything from San Francisco down to L.A.
Yeah.
And all that.
Well, and that's what's happening. You've got corporations. You've got everything from farming conglomerates to retail, every kind of retail, gobbling up smaller companies and running the locals out of business. To look at Walmart, what it's done to local communities. And so you're right. It's not just the media. It's everything. Across the board, corporations.
Right. And so, so when I hear a small business person say, oh, the Republicans are for us. No, they're not. They're for the big businesses. If they had their way, the big businesses would buy you out.
Immediately.
And you wouldn't have a business.
On the cheap, even.
Right?
Yes, on the cheap. They would buy you out.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely, because if they can compress your business, right, you're the small business owner, and you're in the same business as this big conglomerate, well, the big conglomerate can undercut you on price and services and all that, and basically force you out of business or force you to sell to them, right? So if there's anybody who should be against the Republicans, it should be small business owners. If you want a chance to succeed, you need to get rid of the Republicans everywhere, not just in Congress,
locally,
but everywhere.
Yes.
And then you will have a chance, because if you don't, the big companies will buy you out or force you out, and you will no longer have a business. Small business owners, wake up. The Republicans are not your friends.
Your local Republican government and your state government will gladly do it, too. They will gladly do it. Mm-hmm. They will let the corporations come in. They will give them the tax breaks to do it. They'll come in, wipe out the locals, and there you go. It's not just the federal government. It is every local state
absolutely. Look at the state of Kansas, right? Basically they've crashed and burned because of their starve the beast stuff and
Reagan on
all
steroids.
The tax breaks.
Yeah, Reagan on steroids.
And as opposed to, say, California, which went the other way,
right,
which raised taxes on the wealthy and big corporations, and they turned a huge deficit into a huge surplus.
That's right.
So now they actually have some money to do something, right?
And I heard it's a bigger surplus than ever this year, too. So, they're talking about what to do with all that money.
Yeah, and all the rich people, especially in Silicon Valley, are really whining, oh, we have to pay so much in taxes. Yeah, screw you guys. Right? There was that one rich guy last year who proposed breaking up California into 6 different states.
Yeah, the state of Silicon Valley.
And guess what? And that was one of them. And he lived in Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. And, of course, his state would not tax the wealthy and big corporations at all, right? They get all the tax money from
they'd get 2 extra senators to send to Washington to try to shut down the government.
Mm-hmm.
So, and get rid of
Exactly.
Well, I tell you, man, it's frightening. It really is. The whole thing, it's very frightening. This is our information. This is the stuff we rely on to know what's going on. We need not just the right or the wrong spin. We need the accurate events and the accurate information.
We need the truth.
Yeah, desperately, and more all the time.
The facts.
All right, well, once again, Andrew, more than food for thought, and I really appreciate all your information on this. It's indeed worse than what we thought.
Yeah, unfortunately is, but thank you for allowing me to vent, sir.
Absolutely, thank you. It's truly amazing, the whole thing. It's just truly amazing, and I'm always amazed at what facts can do. Facts are great things. All people need to do is find out about them, the facts, before they begin spewing right-wing talking points that can only be described as lies. Lies! Our thanks to fascist hunter Andrew Rei. You can learn more about media manipulation by fascists at Andrew's Facebook page. Read Andrew's notes on the subject. Rei is spelled R-E-I. And, of course, you can always expect the brilliance of this show every time Andrew is a guest here and every other time you listen. That's right. Listen to all of the shows at kerryfoxlive.com. That's kerryfoxlive.com. It's absolutely free. It's amazing. You can also find the show at YouTube. Just search for Kerry Fox Live. I'll have the link on the page directly to YouTube soon. But if you search for Kerry Fox Live, our channel will pop up. That's right. The tough issues on this show now tackled on YouTube. as I now go face-to-face with viewers as well as listeners. Keep up with breaking political news along with me on Twitter, on the Twitter feed at Kerry Fox Live. Thank you once again for listening to me spew. As I do, until next time, this is Kerry Fox saying...
Just the talk stations that actually feature live people or people coming out over satellite. You got your Rush Limbaughs and all that other bullshit.